It's a festival known for bringing people together for lively discussions about politics and policy.
It's critical that people become better informed about the issues and the candidates on the ballot and about the stakes they have in the outcome of the election.
The Texas Tribune Festival is happening without the crowds. How the festival is shifting to a virtual experience and spotlighting politicians, activists, and media icons.
Well, the pandemic and price wars that occurred globally have been both catastrophic and historic.
Thousands of Texans lost jobs when the pandemic slashed demand for oil. We look closer at the state of energy in the time of COVID.
We now are looking at a $4.6 billion shortfall.
Texas lawmakers brace for budget battles and divisive debates. We'll get insight from one lawmaker on the House agenda for a challenging session. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Will Dupree, in for Josh Hinkle. The pandemic is bringing big changes to a Texas event that brings in the top names in politics and policy. For 10 years, the Texas Tribune Festival brought crowds to Austin for a weekend of discussions and debates. This year, things are very different. TribFest is an all-you-can-stream virtual event this time around, and it's not just one weekend either. They're taking 30 days to feature 250 different speakers. What has not changed is the diverse list of topics and guests. People who buy a ticket can access an in-depth discussion on health policy with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton will give different perspectives on lessons from the last presidential election and the stakes this time around. And Willie Nelson and his wife Annie will join the festival. It's not about music, though. They're coming to talk about policy reform for marijuana. We are an official partner of the festival. Texas Tribune co-founder and CEO Evan Smith joins us now. And Evan, we just mentioned some of those very big names who are appearing. Who are the people you think people should really pay attention to at this year's festival?
Well, of course, I love all the big names, but I also think that I don't need to recommend the big names. I don't need to tell people you should go see this guy. Maybe you've heard of him, Dr. Anthony Fauci, right? I mean, people are going to gravitate to the obvious names on their own without recommendations. I would say that there are some hidden gems within the program. You know, on the public health front, obviously everybody is focused on the coronavirus as an example. Dr. Peter Hotez, who is the leading epidemiologist and infectious disease specialist in Texas from Baylor College of Medicine. You've probably seen him on cable television in a lab coat and a bow tie. He's a very enthusiastic and energetic guest on all the cable shows during the coronavirus. He's doing a one-on-one with our Health and Human Services reporter, Edgar Walters, about the coronavirus, the progress of the disease, the virus in Texas, and kind of how we can reopen safely. And also Dr. Tom Frieden, who is the former head of the Centers for Disease Control in the Obama administration, is doing a conversation with Chris Boyd of KERA, the public television and radio station in Dallas, for her syndicated show Think. So Dr. Frieden and Dr. Hotez, to me, are as interesting as Dr. Fauci in that they've got a different perspective. They're coming out of public health backgrounds. And I think for all of us who are going through this coronavirus, the sort of last 6 months of the virus and of the economic downturn, and frankly also of the nationwide reckoning on race, at different points in the program, there are these lesser known people who are nonetheless experts in their own way, who can provide clarity and context and insight. And that's really what the festival's about. It's not just about seeing big names, but it's about coming away better informed, smarter, and more engaged. And that means interacting with content at all levels, high, medium, and in some cases, people you haven't even heard of, right? Sort of down here, but who provide enormous value to you.
In the past few years, TribFest has had a growing number of events that people could attend for free. Are you doing anything like that with even this virtual setup?
We absolutely are. So the last 2 years we've had on Saturday of TribFest weekend, tents on Congress Avenue. We called it Open Congress. This was the free part of our festival, and it was typically about 20% of the program. And we really saved some pretty big names for the free part. And here's the thinking behind this is that not everybody has the money to buy a ticket, but the idea that we want people to be more civically engaged, more informed, more productive citizens of Austin and of Texas and of the country, that is the case whether you can afford to buy a ticket or not. So we feel an obligation through our public service mission to make this content as available as possible, and that means at least making a portion of it free. Taking it online, we were able to do essentially the same thing. In fact, probably a higher percentage, Will, of our content this year is free than in previous years. It's probably closer to 25%. And it's a real range of things. It's public policy discussions, it's podcasts, but it's also some very big interviews with, big name figures. Senator Marco Rubio, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Ambassador Kay Bailey Hutchison, MJ Hager, the candidate for Texas Senate. I believe that's a free event. H.R. McMaster, President Trump's former national security advisor. We have a lot of really great conversations for people that are free. But the bulk of the content is, as always, ticketed. You got to buy a ticket. But I think we have not moved away from the public service mission aspect of this. Especially in an enormously important election year, it's critical that people become better informed about the issues and the candidates on the ballot and about the stakes they have in the outcome of the election. And so we're going to do everything we can to provide as much content to as many people as possible.
You're almost a week in now to the Tribune Festival. How is it going so far? What kind of response are you getting despite it all kind of being online?
I got to tell you, I have a stake in this self-interested answer, but it's going really well. I think the interface, the technology has actually worked out really well. People are able to get access to the content pretty easily. We've had people who've come to the festival in person for many years in a row write us and say, I miss being out among the people, but I kind of like this better because I can go on and watch content at any time. I don't have to actually be in a room at a given time on a given day. Much of the content that we have is on demand so that you can actually watch it when you're ready to watch it, when you've got an opportunity to watch it. And from my perspective, there's a lot of value in giving people as much flexibility to access it as possible. Also, what we found over the last 6 months, when we've done virtual events, we had to pivot our live events away from virtual beginning at about the end of March, is you get a lot of people on the day you do the event, but then the video is available for several days afterwards. And the long tail, you get just a whole lot more people than you ever would have expected. And so we're getting enormous engagement numbers, audience numbers that we think of kind of more broadly as how are people interacting with the content over time. It's really been very heartening to see. We've sold thousands and thousands of tickets. We have so many people online with us and so much interest. And the best measure to me of the success of this program is once people actually got to see the program and once the festival began on September 1st, we've seen a surge in interest, a surge in audience, and a surge in ticket sales because people are now looking at the program, they're seeing how they get to interact with the content, and they're going, oh, wait a minute, I get this now. The theory of it was one thing, the reality of it is another. And I think that's produced really for a lot of people an amazing festival experience. Very different than previous, but an amazing experience nonetheless. Here's the last thing I'll say to you. I think like everything else during this period of our lives, the after is not going to be exactly the same as the before, right? So we all went into this period of 6 months that we had never experienced before, and so many things about our lives have changed. And this festival was one of the things, at least at the Tribune, that really changed. We had to pivot from an in-person event we'd done for 9 consecutive years to one that now is virtual. But when we come out of this period of whatever months it is, number of months it is, and we go back to what we think of as our normal lives, there are going to be things that changed forever during this period that are not going to be exactly as they were before. And this festival is going to be one of those things. I think when we plan the festival for next year, if it does get to be in person, then, knock on wood that it does, I expect that many of the things we learned during this virtual festival year will be rolled forward, and that there'll be virtual aspects to the festival next year, in part because we've reached a wider audience of people who don't have to come to Austin. And we've also been able to attract the kind of speakers who could do it this year because it was virtual, but couldn't have come to Austin if we had done it in person. So I think actually the lessons of this are going to inform the decisions that we make about the festival and so many other things for the future.
Texas Tribune CEO Evan Smith, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with the rest of the festival.
Thanks, Will.
Families here are looking for people who represent their lived experience.
Perspectives in the battle for seats in Congress.
I think right now people are interested in making sure that they've got job security, that our economy doesn't go down the tank.
How a pair of panels at the Texas Tribune Festival are giving a unique insight into the people who want to shape the state's future. Plunging demand for oil cost thousands of Texans their jobs. We'll look closer at the challenges and the encouraging signs to bring those jobs back to Texas. A big storyline in the November election in Texas is the battle for seats in Congress. Texas Democrats are trying to flip several seats from red to blue. Republicans have their sights set on winning back seats that flipped back in 2018. A pair of panels at the Texas Tribune Festival give some insight into the ideas behind the campaigns to reshape the House. The red team panel focuses on 4 Republicans running for Congress. The blue team panel features interviews with 4 Democrats. The panels included interviews from both the Democrat and the Republican facing off in District 24. That's in the DFW area. Incumbent Kenny Marchant is not running for re-election. Democrat Candace Valenzuela and Republican Beth Van Dye each made their case to voters.
Families here are looking for people who represent their lived experience. They're looking for people who are concerned with making ends meet for their families, who are concerned with educating their children, who are concerned with taking care of their parents. And right now, the party that seems to be offering the values that are concerned with those things is the Democratic Party.
I'm running to really fix a broken healthcare system. I think I'm running so that you've got adults in the room who are focused on solutions instead of on party, bickering. I'm running based on my experience, having been a city council member for one of the largest cities in the country for 6 years, having been a mayor, coming out of a recession and providing job opportunities and safe streets, and somebody who's worked with our school districts.
As a person who's experienced this healthcare system, I've had a pre-existing condition. I had a 100% markup on my insurance. I had high deductibles, and I was working 2 or 3 jobs just to pay my healthcare bills. So I'm supporting a robust public option, one that covers 100% of costs for folks that are making under $50,000 a year, one that covers 90% of costs for folks making over $50,000 a year.
I think when people are looking for health care solutions, they want to be able to have access. They want something that's affordable. They want to have high quality. And I think looking at a government-run system is the exact opposite of that.
I would be pushing for a lot of the same things I'm seeing: a substantial campaign finance reform, making sure that people have access to the polls, making sure that our USPS is funded to do the job that it's supposed to do, and making sure that families get the relief that they need.
I think right now people are interested in making sure that they've got job security, that our economy doesn't go down the tank, that they've got access to health care. And I've seen an administration that's been focused on that.
The interviews are now posted online for people who have tickets to the Texas Tribune Festival. We have information on how you can see those streams. Just look for this story in the Texas Politics section of this station's website. When COVID-19 slashed demand for oil, thousands of Texans lost their jobs in the fallout.
As the economy begins to normalize, we know that demand for the product will return.
We look closer at the state of oil and gas jobs in Texas and the obstacles that could keep some of those jobs from ever coming back. The stage is set for big battles over money and policy. We'll get insight into the House agenda for the upcoming session for Texas lawmakers. COVID-19 shutdowns slashed the demand for oil all over the world. Prices plunged and thousands of Texans lost their jobs in the fallout. Now, demand is starting to rise again, but it's still uncertain when those jobs will come back or if even some of them are gone for good. For insight, we're joined now by Todd Staples, president of the Texas Oil and Gas Association. Welcome, Todd.
Good to be with you, Will. Thank you.
You're on a TribFest panel called Energy in the Time of COVID. First off, how badly did the pandemic hit the oil and gas industry here in Texas?
Well, the pandemic and price wars that occurred globally have been both catastrophic and historic. But if you think about it, the immediate disruption of the global economy, the global lifestyle, has impacted everyone. Oil and natural gas systems have been impacted greatly, even though they have continued to deliver the affordable, reliable power that Texans and Americans depend upon. But beyond oil and gas, our restaurants, our airlines, even our schools are having to reinvent themselves. So I think everyone is seeing this time as a time to get back to basics, to reflect on your processes and how to deliver your product more efficiently and more effectively.
Unfortunately, tens of thousands of Texans lost their jobs during the pandemic. Do you see those jobs coming back? What are some of the obstacles that you see the industry is facing for a full recovery?
Well, the biggest challenge is getting our economy moving again, getting our Friday night football games continuing to occur, travel beginning to resume to more normal levels. I think as a society, we're all going to look, can we be more efficient? I think, can we Zoom into a meeting rather than travel into a meeting? I think that in-person interaction is important. I think our children being with their peers in a learning environment is the most effective way to learn. And so I think for full recovery process, we're going to see demand to need to return. But here's the thing. We have 300 million people in America today, billions on our planet. The energy intensity level is much greater in America than it is globally. And so as Texas continues to produce clean natural gas, that's going to be exported around the globe as the global economy returns. And we will continue to have strong demand for this affordable, renewable energy supplies, both renewable, both our traditional supplies. Well, there's room for everyone to meet the global energy needs.
Your TribFest panel is looking at energy in the time of COVID. How do you see this pandemic changing the Texas oil and gas industry?
Well, I think, anytime there's been a market correction or market circumstances, the industry has really focused on pioneering breakthrough technologies. Innovation and research and development has been a game changer. I know the term fracking gets misaligned frequently today. Study after studies have proven that fracking does not have systemic problems causing to our water or air supplies. And fracking is really a very small part of the process of developing energy and delivering it to the consumer. But fracking is technology that has ushered in clean natural gas that is the reason our air quality is cleaner. So as I look at the pandemic and as I look at COVID, I know that oil and gas will continue to look in research and development and techniques that can deliver these products. And if we think about this pandemic, oil and natural gas has been a big part of the response effort because of the plastics, all the medical devices, the personal protection equipment. Most of that has a component of oil or natural gas. Oil and natural gas are the building blocks of our society, and we're looking to deliver that product more efficiently and to continue a strong track record of environmental progress.
Todd Staples, president of the Texas Oil and Gas Association, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Staples will be featured on the Energy in the Time of COVID panel at the Texas Tribune Festival. That discussion will play online at 8 a.m. next Thursday. It will be available on demand as well for TribFest ticket holders afterwards. You can get your tickets at tribfest.org. The next session of the Texas legislature will likely be one of the most difficult in years.
Rather than having a $3 billion surplus, which is what we left session with, we now are looking at a $4.6 billion shortfall.
Battles over the budget and other divisive fights loom ahead. We'll get insight from one lawmaker on the House agenda for a challenging session. The next session of the Texas legislature will likely be one of the most challenging in years. Lawmakers will face battles over the budget in the wake of the pandemic, as well as divisive fights over criminal justice reform and redistricting. A panel this week at the Texas Tribune Festival brings 4 lawmakers from different parties together for insight on the challenges ahead. One of those lawmakers is State Representative Donna Howard, a Democrat from Austin. State Representative, welcome. You've been in the legislature since 2007. Do you think this upcoming session will be the most difficult one you'll face?
Well, actually, I've been there since 2006 because I came in a special election, and the first thing I had to do was go into a special session and vote on school finance property tax swap. That was a pretty challenging thing to start off with, but we had a shortfall in 2011 that was much greater than the one we're facing now. We got through that. We've learned some lessons. This is going to be a challenging session coming up. but we have a lot that we can rely on here, a lot of opportunities to stay focused on the things that we need to invest in, like healthcare and education. We can't step back from that because Texans need help right now in order to get back to work and keep moving our economy forward.
You are on the Appropriations Committee. What challenges do you see there? You mentioned some of those just a moment ago. And also identify what your priorities are.
Okay. Yeah, well, certainly the comptroller has revised the revenue estimate for the current biennium that we're in. And rather than having a $3 billion surplus, which is what we left session with, we now are looking at a $4.6 billion shortfall. But the good news is we do have, as I said, some options, one of which is our Economic Stabilization Fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund, which is projected to have close to $9 billion in that. We have that cushion, and that's good. We have opportunities to look at Medicaid expansion, which is, of course, going to be one of my priorities, and I think a lot of legislators' priorities now, because we need to bring those federal dollars back to Texas to help us cover the costs here. And we would get approximately $10 billion a year if we chose to do that. Most other states are doing it now too. So we're hoping that that's going to happen. We could look at other options for revenue. Some people are talking about cannabis and the tax that we could have on that if we legalized marijuana. Clearly, the big issues are going to be our budget, redistricting. Those are going to be high priorities for me. Also looking at how we're going to maintain the gains we made in public education last session with HB3. We made a significant investment of about $6 billion more in public education and reduced taxes by about $5 billion. I think that's a pretty bipartisan issue there that we're not going to want to go back on. So a lot of focus is going to be on that, but healthcare, education, redistricting, the budget.
Now, back in 2018, leading up to the legislative session, committee members met throughout the summer and fall to lay the groundwork for what would happen during the session. Members have not been meeting this time around. Is there work going on behind the scenes that we're just not seeing? And would the lack of any kind of meetings slow down the process at all?
Quite frankly, this is one of the busiest interims I've ever had, I guess, as a result of everybody being on Zoom all the time. But absolutely different. The lack of involvement of the legislature in decisions that are being made is just disturbing for most of us. There's been a request for a 5% reduction in many of our state agencies, including in women's health care, in early childhood intervention, in food bank programs. This came from the big three, primarily, big three leadership in our state. The legislature has not had an opportunity to weigh in. We haven't been able to meet. The Capitol is not even open. And until the Capitol is open, if the Capitol opens, then we could have some hearings, but we've not been able to do that. The lack of transparency, the lack of involvement in the decisions being made is very frustrating to those of us that are trying to provide oversight to what's going on. I've been kind of referring to it as oversight by letter because it seems like we're constantly sending letters out, asking for things, pointing things out, but still don't have the kind of involvement that we typically have in interims where we are actually having hearings. We're hearing from the public. We're hearing from the agencies. We can dig deep into what's going on and make decisions, hopefully, that will be in the best interest of the state. We don't have that opportunity right now, and it is extremely frustrating.
State Representative Donna Howard, thanks so much for joining us. Representative Howard will be featured on the House Agenda panel at the Texas Tribune Festival. That discussion will play online at 8 a.m. next Monday. It will also be available on demand for TribFest ticket holders. Afterwards, you can get your tickets at tribfest.org. Thank you again for joining us. For State of Texas, I'm Will Dupree in for Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look again at Texas politics.